If you are a witchy content creator and would like to support raising awareness and education about the Palestinian colonization and genocide, along with raising funds with medical aid for Palestinians, I am working to start the Witches for Palestine project. No matter the numbers, if you want to be part of Witches for Palestine, drop me an email and we're gonna do our bit to support a free Palestine. Hello witches, and welcome back to Activist Witch, where we discuss witchcraft and activism. You can call me Isha, my pronouns are she, they, and this is the part 2 of the Occultea Tag. I split this video in 2 parts for your easier perusal of my answers. In the first part, we discussed about the witchcraft community, how it applies online, and the issues of authenticity in content creation. In this part, we will talk about imposter syndrome and FOMO, fear of missing out, the ways that some capitalize off of the community, and general conclusions. But before we get started, let me remind you that I've opened a Ko-fi, which is an alternative to Patreon that takes less from creators. And on there, you can do a one-off donation, a monthly donation, or even get a tarot reading with me, Italian style. The low-income option starts at £5. And if you decide to support my work there, thank you so very much. So if you're still with me, thank you so very much. If you're wondering what you're doing here, you might want to watch the first part because there's also my introduction there. Here we're gonna delve into the next topic, which is imposter syndrome and fear of missing out. The first point is about following other creators, and does this inspire or create indeed, fear of missing out? On my side, personally, I find inspiration, but it very rarely pokes me in a way that if I don't already have a seed blooming in the back of my head, then I feel like I need to jump on a bandwagon, if it makes sense. The reason why I'm doing this entire video is because technically my audience doesn't care about me making this video at all. But since it came out, I've had it at the back of my head because, prompts to talk about how I see the world, my favorite thing. It's very hard to make me do things that I don't like and I don't want to do. And I don't have the aspiration of doing things just to achieve any kind of return other than I enjoy this. Then it's always to be at the forefront. Otherwise, there's no point for me at all. Also, I've been made aware that this might be something that affects people, especially when they watch TikTok, because there's this running after trends and copying things and going after each other. Witchtube here on YouTube is much more spread out. So whilst watching content might give me ideas of, I have something to say about that, or I do that differently, is it worth sharing? That is more of a indeed inspiration rather than fear of missing out. And maybe I owe that to my old, albeit unsuspicious age, but that's how I see things. The next question, I wish I could talk more, and likely will connect to a video that I will do specifically about the influence that capitalism and consumerism have on the witchcraft community. And it's literally about the fear of missing out. Has it ever left people vulnerable financially? So the idea that if you keep seeing a tool, a book, something talked about, then you feel like you have to go and get it. And I think this applies especially for social media like Instagram, because again, as I mentioned in my previous video, it's very focused on the aesthetic, because Instagram is about the picture that you post rather than the caption. So I understand how that aesthetic can feel like there's a pressure to be followed. Maybe I shouldn't have done this video dressed like I'm in my villain gothic era, actually. In brief, and then please do let me know if you would like a full video on this. It's something that I noticed with witchcore and the derivation that it is from cottagecore, and the idea that a certain aesthetic by itself, if you manage to buy your way into it or acquire it some ways, can indeed make up for a lot of other things, sometimes completely for the practice itself. And whilst that's an issue of consumerism and capitalism and needs to be understood in that context to be then deconstructed and understand that no, you don't need that stuff, I still do not blame people that feel like that, because here's my point. I am not surprised at all if most people that started to have an interest in witchcraft, especially since the pandemic, have done so because the idea of being the old witch lady at the margins of the village that concocts potions and herbs is a manifestation of the idea of slower living that we had a slight taste during the pandemic, and it was barely the silver lining of the horrible things that were happening. But that left people with the idea that, oh, maybe this is what I'm meant for, more than hustling to 3 jobs to keep going because I've been told all my life that's what you're expected to do. And if witchcore and witchcraft in general makes people feel like they can go to a more slow living and nurture to their plants in the garden and go into nature, while still locked in a life under capitalism, they come back home from 8 hours of work in an office after hours of commuting maybe. They want a slow living. They literally can't afford it in time terms. But what capitalism and their job has afforded them at that point is the economical power of buying things. It's the only thing that capitalism allows them. So when they go to buy a frolicking skirt or a wand or a cauldron, it might give them the feeling that even if they cannot access what they actually want, which is time to care about themselves and the things that make them feel better as a human being, the next best thing becomes the objects related to the aesthetic that gives them this feeling of slow living. And I can hardly blame people to try and find ways to cope in late-stage capitalism. The next point is about comparison, and I will say this: comparison just fosters jealousy, and the only comparison that you should do healthily is with yourself yesterday. And that's all I'm going to say on the matter. The next question would be about imposter syndrome. But for some bizarre reason, that is something that I've never experienced in my life. I am not arrogant or presumptuous, but in short, I genuinely think that if you come from as many marginalization as I do, where people make you feel less than human, all you have for yourself is to hang on to whatever value you think you have. In that sense, because the world has convinced me that I have none and I had to fight tooth and nail to actually grasp onto what I think I have, no, imposter syndrome is not something that has come to me. Would I dare say that for imposter syndrome to be there at all, you need to have some kind of privilege? Which, do not mistake me, I have some kinds of privilege. I do wonder if in that direction I do feel imposter syndromes, but not awarely so far. I am cunty in this video. I am serving CUNT. The last point is about practicing and how would my practice look without social media. And it would look exactly like it does. When I made the Vesta altar, it was for me to give her things that feel like wrap her in her mood. Same with the Venus altar that I made. And I think it's interesting. When I then see how beautiful and cozy I managed to make them, I feel like, oh, this is worth sharing. But the cause and effect is always the other way around. I do something, it happens to be cozy, I have this thing for coziness. I delude myself into thinking that my house could be seen as a cottage in some ways, and so I go with it, and then when it accidentally looks nice, I'm happy to take a picture. Small detail and insight in me and why this works this way for me. I have been raised by a mother who was a hoarder. I've never had nice things or a nice place around, so since I've had my own place, keeping it in a certain way that makes me feel nice and good and complete without the constant anxiety of there's stuff and it's not in the right place and it's just a mess. It's a natural thing that is soothing for me. accidentally it happens that sometimes it's nice aesthetically, but I wouldn't change it if it wasn't for others. Topic number 4 is about capitalizing of the community. What does it mean? The first point is about considering a comparison between online and in-person communities, and if one is more valid than the other. And I would argue that it's not validity, the difference is just what you actually do in them. I think they serve different purposes. The Witchtube community, even as a creator, gives us a place to confront each other, not only in our witchcraft, but also in our content creation, in the simple fact that we do film, we do edit, we do sometimes make scripts. There's all that videographer part as well. When I meet my coven or when I do workshops here in Cardiff, it's different because the entire focus then becomes the witchcraft side. However, when you have different people in the same space that are doing something or are doing a ritual, the details get diluted a bit. So there are pros and cons in both, but to me they serve different purposes. That's the main thing. How did they impact me as a person, the online community and the in-person community? Beautifully, they both made me grow a lot. In person, I am very lucky because I was already part of the queer community here in Cardiff, and most of the people that I know, most of the people in my coven are actually queer activists as well. So it's an extension of that. We already know that our core values are similar. We just happen to have this interest in common as well, and so we share that. So I count myself extremely lucky in that. On the other side, for the online community, because I come from other online communities dedicated to other subjects, what I loved about Witchtube so far is that there is probably a slightly deeper and personally focused connection. I guess because witchcraft is related to spirituality, it doesn't have to be, but it is in most cases. And that seems to give more attention to the fact that we are people, individuals, and it's interesting to know each other as individuals. There's more care than I've ever seen in a community or a niche, even for people that do this for a living, which is not common. The next point is about the dangers of capitalizing off of the witchcraft community. And maybe it tries to refer to more than what I'm going to address, but this is what came to mind for me. And it applies to realistically every kind of niche that has an online community and therefore online personalities, online content creators and influencers. I would wholeheartedly suggest to anyone that decides to put their face and put content out to do it first and foremost because they like it and enjoy it, for 2 reasons. One, very rarely someone that just decides to make content but doesn't have incredible amount of money to invest in it can just decide before even starting, I'm gonna do this for a living. Ask any content creator that live off of their content creation, they will likely tell you the same. It's a long and long-winded road to get there, even when you start to plan for it. And when you start to plan for it and you want it to happen within the next few months or a year, you need to have disproportionate amounts of money behind you to bring your quality so high that it naturally drives people to you. So first things first, there needs to be authenticity, going back to before, because just getting into a community deciding, I'm gonna be a content creator for a living, you're gonna be sorely disappointed. Second point, I forgot it. Second point, and here I'll be slightly cunty and bring up something that actually was taught to us during the workshops made by YouTube itself. I've been a content creator for a long time. I've been a professional content creator before, and because of that, I've had a lot of access to what used to be the YouTube Space London. Something that kept being repeated there of the golden rules to always keep in mind if you happen to be lucky enough that content creation can become your day job is the ability to sustain that in the future. Sustainability in the kind of content that you make requires a care, requires an interest that cannot be faked for long enough for it to still make you money while you stopped caring. So those are my 2 cents on the matter. Have I been personally affected or seen people affected by this? Oh yeah. And then we go to paywalls. Should there be communities that are held behind paywalls in the witchcraft community? And I am so grateful for this. If you have watched my video on the 7 deadly feminist sins, you will have seen that the last point is greed. Now, that video was about deconstructing the sins and how they can actually be good things and useful things to use against the system that has put those sins on our heads to actually keep controlling us. For greed, the entire point was to understand one's own self-value, and I still believe that that is very important. An issue that I have with it, though, is forgetting that there is intersectionality at play in everything, including especially communities, especially when they gather around something that is slightly ineffable, like witchcraft. So should there be communities that are behind the paywall? Absolutely. Every single one of them should also consider low-income options. And that is just something that I understand personally, and I cannot justify with the idea of, oh, I need to be able to value myself. You can be able to value yourself without excluding an entire chunk of people that have been already hurt by the system. At the bottom of witchcraft, I feel that there is a reclamation, partially of feminism, of siblinghood, which very rarely is afforded an existence in the current capitalistic patriarchal society. And the bottom line of siblinghood, which is a derivation of sisterhood, but I'm trying to make it more inclusive, is community and mutual aid. And so deciding that your own value is so much more important than anyone less lucky than you, to completely exclude them with a paywall that they cannot afford, you can absolutely do that. And I'm sure that you pay your bills and rent in a much easier way than I do. It's just something that morally I feel needs to be considered. Ethically, it needs to be considered, because as always, no matter the position that you're in currently, now, to have the ability to grow empathy before something bad happens to you, I feel puts you in a position not only of graciousness, but of balance in the universe. If you have the ability to understand those things before bad things happen to you, you are the culprit of a certain balance that I feel the universe tries to keep. And it might actually keep you safer, because then should by any means anything at all bad happen to you and put you in that situation where you're the one who can't afford, your example might have made other people aware, and now, because of your example, there are more chances given to people that are in a lower position, even when you end up there. So it's not altruism in a way. See it as an investment in your own future if your future goes badly. The man who plants the seed knows that he will never sit in the shadow of that tree, or something along those lines. The next point is about financial investment. And so how do you guarantee the quality of something, whether it's an online course, whether it's anything else that you pay your pretty penny for? How do you guarantee its quality when, again, it's something as ineffable as witchcraft? And my best thought for that goes back to what we mentioned before about developing critical thinking. For instance, I very rarely thought about taking a course myself, but I've heard a lot of times people that I value the critical thinking skills of mentioning good things about the courses of Jason Miller. They cost a very pretty penny, so I don't see myself able to afford them anytime soon. Neither in terms of money nor in terms of time. They seem to also take a lot of time. So going back to the idea of, let's buy things because FOMO and I don't have time otherwise. When it comes to learning, there is not learning that you can buy that will not require time. So consider that. You need to have both time and money to invest. And we are getting to our conclusions. What have we learned today? What are some topics that I would like to see discussed more in the community? And I might be biased here, but again, I haven't invented the fact that witchcraft is activism, witchcraft is political, witchcraft is rebellion to a system. Before it was Christianity, nowadays is mainly the god of money and capitalism. I genuinely do believe that there is a lot of potential in that sense, and I wish that more people embraced it. And I feel that a lot of people feel like they don't know enough. They have a feeling that things are not quite right, but haven't necessarily had the time to delve into, I don't know, gender studies, feminist books, anti-capitalism. Who has read the Socialist Manifesto, really? So I understand the doubt, but the beautiful thing is that there's always time to learn. There's always time to ask. There is no such thing as a stupid question ever. Anyone that asks questions to cure their own ignorance is someone that's already doing a step forward to make themselves and then the world a better place. So I think that that should be more vocally said. So there, I said it. What are my community needs? I think my community needs overlap a lot with my needs from a system that, despite the efforts of what unfortunately is still a minority, is a system rigged to favor white, cis, able men that are also wealthy, that kind of thing. Now, the witchcraft community has a natural penchant for including more non-binary and female-identifying people. I think that it's important to break down those intersectional privileges I mentioned before, because the moment that you understand your privilege, you understand how to put it to the service of those who don't. And I'll bring a very personal example here if it matters. There have been studies on how the algorithm, the thumbnails on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram favors a certain kind of look in a person, especially if they are female presenting. I do not fit that look in anything. And that goes along with the fact that the algorithm will show you my face much less than they will show you what is conventionally considered a pretty face. And that just reinforces the unconscious biases of someone that has been raised in the culture of the last century. It's not a bad thing to have privilege. In this case, it's not a bad thing to have thin, skinny privilege. If you understand that you have it, and you understand that others don't, maybe amplify their voices. If you understand that you have white privilege over a person of color, maybe amplify their voice, because people will naturally think that you are more authoritative because you are more pleasant to the way that their eye has been trained. And having a platform allows us to make a minuscule change in what the common perception is, because this is still a media. So that is what I hope the community can do. Break through their own unconscious biases and take acknowledgement of their own privilege. Privilege is not a bad thing to have. You don't have to deny that you have it because it's a dirty thing. You need to understand it and embrace it so that you can put it to the service of those who don't. What aspects I would like the community to hold me and support me more? And again, I have to go on the activist side. I know that the things that I talk about can be uncomfortable. The simple fact that I'm saying, take awareness of your privilege, make people uncomfortable because the idea of privilege as being some advantage takes away from sometimes their self-belief that everything that they have, they worked for, they deserve. So I understand how not necessarily coddling my content can be at times. However, what I'm trying to do is to share what I have learned to break my own prejudice and unconscious biases, and to go and understand why things that happened to me at the receiving end of this were not quite right, but I, for a long time, wasn't able to stand up and say, this is not right. For most of my life, I took what is unacceptable to do to a human being as my own fault because I knew that I didn't fit into what the world asked me to be. I wasn't feminine enough, I wasn't thin enough, I wasn't white enough, I didn't have enough of a proper accent. All those things built up and made me feel like I had to be always apologizing for my existence, and therefore anything that wasn't a beating was something to be very grateful for. I hope that nobody has to go through that same thing, and that's the kind of support that I wish I had. I know that these are heavy subjects, but I also know that the witchcraft community, because it has this interest in something that is so fundamentally rebellious, can be an incredible ally to so many other marginalizations. And somebody has to say that, even if it's not as pleasant and colorful as others can do. How can we help each other removing the peer pressure? Again, I don't know if this applies to me. I don't necessarily feel that as much. I don't feel like if somebody else does something, I need to do it as well. But again, I know that I am slightly unique / alone in what I do. There's the odd video of people that mention we should also be activists, but it's not necessarily the core of what they do, and it's absolutely fair. I've accidentally carved a one-person niche at the moment for myself, which I've been very vocally told I shouldn't have done, and I should do something more pleasant and more enticing to people. Going back to what I mentioned about authenticity, if I were here just showing you spells or showing you how I do my spells or how I go frolicking in meadows, I wouldn't be able to sustain that for long, because before long I would feel the need to mention how terribly affected the idea of witchcraft was towards people that were in any way not conforming to the system. It's not a part of me that I can cut off, and so it accidentally happened to be the part of me that I share because I think that's what's important. Is it convenient? Hardly. But again, even if it doesn't make me the most popular, it gets me to connect to people that evidently see a sliver of themselves in me, or see a sliver of what they would like to know or to be. And boy, oh boy, if I'm here for that. How can we bring together more constructive criticism rather than being shady? And to that I can bring my experience. Usually what sounds like constructive criticism to me comes with a solution rather than just a criticism. You really shouldn't do that. That feels bad, that looks bad, that is just being shady. Oh, that wasn't its best, but you know what, if you do this, maybe can, I don't know, that's what I would do, maybe that can be useful. When you bring a solution with it, it feels like you care for it to be better rather than you cared for it just to be not what you wanted or expected. The next point is about how can we take on that criticism and feedback gracefully, basically. And in my personal experience, again, the simple fact that I make this content is to connect with people. So everything that I do is I try to keep as much fluid and co-creative as possible. Like, there's a reason why most of my videos are actually done based on polls that I give to my audience, and that's just to try and understand and talk to each other, and these are the things that I'm interested in anyway, but what of these would be useful to you? It gets to a point where criticism becomes a simple bashing, and that I will not take. And that has happened in terms of my identity being a non-binary person. That has happened for gatekeeping. I've been told that because I'm not psychic, or not yet, my tarot readings are invalid, despite the fact that they are problematically accurate. And all that kind of stuff I will not stand for. It's the infamous old rule, your freedom ends where someone else's begin. So I am open to criticism until they tell me that what needs to change is my identity, which is something that cannot change. I cannot change the kind of powers that I have. I am working on them, but I'm not less valid because I currently am not clairvoyant. It's that kind of thing. I think criticism needs to exist for something that a person can grow from. When you're just criticizing the person they are, that cannot be changed, that it's intrinsically them, you're just hating. The next point is the community members who I look up to, that I find reliable, and I think I might send you again to my low energy video, because there's the entire Witchtube community that keeps me company when my brain does not accept me doing stuff. Most recently, like I have literally said to my wife today, I was looking up on the TV and there was Ari talking on her Occultea video, and I looked at her and I think I must have looked at her like I had almost a crush on her, and I was like, is Ari my favorite Witchtuber? I think she is. And I'm a bit of a fangirl for Ari, what can I say? My wife joked that it's because she gives me an example of what it would be if my life had been lived and born in Britain. And I'd like to think so, because not only she applies a kind of professional critical thinking, like I don't think that you acquire critical thinking only by studying and going to university and all of that. It's not something that is necessarily behind that. And I can tell you that from my experience from university, especially my BA, critical thinking was very much forbidden. It wasn't allowed for you to draw conclusions that were not written in books. So that is not even a guarantee. But the simple fact that you spend a lot of time gathering information, just seeing the bookshelf behind Ari gives me an idea that the amount of information that she has gathered and considered and compared, I will pretty much trust every single word that escapes her lips. Absolutely. No questions asked. Exactly because I'm pretty sure that if any question was asked, she would have all the receipts ready for me. And it doesn't get better than that when you need to trust someone's information. That, in fairness, is something that Eddie, the Wolfsbane Witch, done as well. They do videos and then bring on research and bring papers and bring... It's just something that I really, really appreciate. And to a degree, it's something that possibly I do because there is a hint of self-doubt, not quite self-doubt. I know that what I say is valid, but being femme-presenting and fat and coming from the health and fitness community, I was always torn to shreds. So I had come to the habit of presenting such a list of receipts that I can recognize the amount of work that has gone into it when somebody else does it, and so I can only appreciate it. So in conclusion, what to add to this? I'll be very honest. Let me word this in a way that is less cunty than this video has been so far. You know that overused quote from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility? Because I have been a professional content creator before, and the reason why I'm no longer that is because of a choice that I made. I understand on one side the pressure of people that find themselves all of a sudden transported from a place of, oh, I can make a living out of this, from the simple fact that they started off sharing because they like this, they enjoyed this. Meow. I understand the pressure that it becomes when suddenly you have a livelihood from something that you enjoy doing. Unfortunately, a side effect of that is starting to just look up along the ladder that you are rather than down, which ironically is a mistake that white feminism does. They only want to be at the same level of white cis het men within the patriarchy rather than realizing there are so many more marginalized identities just behind me. How do I help them come up? And that is my point in this. I think the more popularity you have, the more responsibility you have, not only for the quality of your content, but for what the next generation of this community will be, because any time that then you edit and present something or someone new, it can make them or break them. Like something interesting that you might have noticed if you've ever gone to the homepage of my own channel is that on the links, on the channels that I recommend, I try to recommend all content creators of color. Because that's the reason why I started. I wanted to bring representation in a very white but very well-intentioned community. And if you notice the order they are in, they are from the lower subscribers to the highest, to the point that you have to click to go to the highest, and the highest is Olivia, the Witch of Wonderlust, who is a witch of color, who I look up to, but that doesn't need me to propel her up, because in the privilege that is given by numbers and popularity, she doesn't need me, she's already there. So I do, in that sense, feel the responsibility, even just with 1,000 subscribers, to tell you about Lara, the poet witch. They're such a beautiful human being that even if you weren't interested in witchcraft, it would be beautiful to learn about them. That's why you have Juju Time, they have around 1,000 subscribers like I do. You have Aradia, the Witch of Darklight, which is just over 2,000. They are literally put in the inverse order of popularity, because even with the very little reach that I have, the very least that I can do is bring up with me whoever risks to be left behind. So my delight, truthfully, as coming into this community has been to see that some have had this understanding of their power before it was made notice to them. The entire reason why I probably have 1,000 subscribers is because Mary Grace Faroon one day decided to share my video about Italian witchcraft. Ari has shared my video, and a very similar thing happened. So it's this thing about you know where you are in the ladder, look down rather than looking up, because looking up, of course, it can make you even bigger, even better, even more popular. Maybe you can make this your day job, amazing. But when you look down the ladder, you give a chance to people who have the talent, just haven't had luck or privilege, whether it's because you look prettier, because you look more conventionally pretty, because you have more time to dedicate to your video making rather than anyone else might have the time for. It's all those things. And again, it's the best that we can do with the privilege that we are afforded within this system until we take it down. And on the note, that is why I always suggest that until the next time, it's worth Xing the patriarchy together, because we would all benefit from it.